Hey, I'm stealing an idea, or at least a format. As of late, I've been really enjoying the videos that Sean Shonson's been putting out on obscure and Japan-exclusive PS1 games, and I thought it might be kind of fun to tackle a similar sort of thing, just with something that I deeply love, that being Tokusatsu. That is to say, covering games about Tokusatsu. There are a lot of games based on different Toku series spanning all kinds of consoles, from the Famicom Disk System all the way up to the Switch, PS4, and even smartphones. But to keep in the theme of ripping off the funny Irishman, I'm going to focus specifically on PS1 games today. There's a pretty sizable pool to choose from just on this console, so we'll save other platforms and games for another time. Toku games released on the PS1 pretty much as soon as the console was on the market and into the lifespan of the PS2, so we are spoiled for choice. This isn't going to be every single one of these games because there are some that aren't that interesting to talk about, and there's a non-zero chance that I missed some really obscure one, but it should give a good peek into what Toku stuff you can find on Sony's landmark console. We've got a few games to go through, so let's just get right into it and go down the list in an entirely arbitrary order based on my mood. We'll get some of the less remarkable ones out of the way first, so we can spend as much time as possible on the really good ones. Bad news for Ultra fans, basically any Ultraman game on the PS1 is pretty lackluster. Ultraman Fighting Evolution is probably the most notable one since it ended up spawning several sequels on the PS2 and PSP. Not that you'd be able to guess that from this game though, because it is rough. It's your pretty standard fighting game. Pick an Ultra between Ultraman, Ultra 7, or Ultraman Taro, or even one of several kaiju, and lay the smackdown on your opponent. It gets the look right, you feel properly huge in the environments, but it feels like absolute shit to play. Everything feels so heavy and sluggish, which, while accurate for how Ultraman actually moves, doesn't exactly make for a fun gaming experience. Also, trying to use the Spacium Beam is a right pain in the ass. It takes so long to charge that odds are pretty solid the enemy's going to be able to get right next to you and whack you out of it before you even manage to fire. And even if that doesn't happen, they'll probably sidestep out of the way just as soon as you use it, while you spend the next 14.5 centuries waiting before you can do anything else. Pretty much the only way to use it effectively is to knock an enemy down and then start charging it, so you just might manage to blast them with it when they stand up, but even that's not a guarantee. I didn't end up spending a whole lot of time with this one. Like I said, it just doesn't feel good to play at all. I imagine, at least, that the follow-ups are way better. I hope so, anyway. Despite all that, Fighting Evolution is still quite a bit better than Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Dyna, Two New Lights. This one is also a fighting game, but it's played from this behind-the-back angle, which makes it damn hard to tell how close you are to the opponent. The controls are maybe even more sluggish than Fighting Evolution, and now you have tank controls, which I truly don't think I've ever seen in a fighting game before. This one was so unfun to play, I went through it for even less time, to the point where I never even got to play as Dyna. According to the game's Japanese Wikipedia page, Stage 11 is the first time you can control Dyna, and I am not sticking with this shit that long. I could tolerate about 5 stages before I just gave up. Quick tangent related to this one though, it seems like every English catalog of the game gets the title wrong. On Wikipedia it's listed as Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Dyna New Generations. This title is also on the Ultraman Wiki. Then, on the PlayStation Data Center, it's called Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Dyna Fighting Evolution New Generations, but neither of these names are accurate. The game's Japanese Wikipedia page, and indeed the fucking box itself, just call it Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Dyna Two New Lights. Or if you go by the actual Japanese title,
新たなる二つの光.
I've no idea how the title ended up getting so wrong on the English side of things, or how it ended up grouped with the Fighting Evolution games despite not being anything like them. GameFAQs gets it right though. Anyway, of the Ultraman-specific PS1 games, the only one I found to be really worth anything was PD Ultraman Invader. I have no idea what the PD is supposed to stand for, but it's also in the title of an Ultraman game on N64. Straight up, this is Space Invaders but with Ultraman. Seriously. It plays pretty much exactly like you would expect, just with a few slight alterations, such as the last enemy in a stage needing to get hit several times before it goes down, and having an actual boss fight right at the end, but for the most part, it is just Space Invaders. It ain't gonna set your world on fire, and you'll probably end up forgetting about it before too long, but it's a decently fun time while it lasts. Our last mid-tier game brings us out of Ultraman and into my preferred toku series, Kamen Rider. Kamen Rider the Bike Race was released as part of the PS1 Simple series, essentially budget titles for the console. This one was part of the Simple 2000 series, so it cost 2,000 yen at release, or roundabouts $20. And right from the get-go, you can tell that this is a budget release. As you could probably surmise, this is a racing game, and a bare-bones one at that. You've got a choice between almost every rider that was around at the time, from Ichigo all the way up to Agito, although you don't get Kamen Rider Black, just Kamen Rider Black RX. You get a grand total of 3 entire tracks to race on, and exactly as many game modes. You'll unlock some new stuff by completing the Grand Prix mode, namely Kuga and Agito as playable characters, as well as the original designs for Ichigo and Nigo, but you can burn through that in less than an hour. I'm not exactly a racing game aficionado, but even for me, this one's just a little too basic. In all honesty, it's not awful, and if you had a friend, it could be good for a little bit of fun, but it's not one you'll be shelving other racing games for. Even on PS1, you're probably better off with Motor Toon Grand Prix. Alright, now on to the ones that are properly worth some time, the games that I can actually suggest sinking your teeth into.
Standing by. Standing by. Henshin! 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 Standing by. Complete. 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 最強のベルトがここに集う。Fire. Fast mode. Ready. Check. Exceed charge. Kamen Rider 5変身ベルトシリーズ。
Let's stick with Kamen Rider, shall we? In 1998, just plain old Kamen Rider was released on the PS1, based on the original show from 1971. In a similar vein to Ultraman Fighting Evolution, we've got another fighting game on our hands, though this one is much better. The main draw, at least for me, is the game's story mode, wherein you'll play through a very truncated version of the show's 98 episodes. Each stage plays out basically the same. You'll start out as an untransformed Takeshi Hongo, and later Hayato Ichimonji, and take down 6 Shocker combat men. Then the monster shows up, your character transforms, and it's a one-on-one fighter at that point. Admittedly, it is a little bit clunky feeling, but it's not unbearable, and especially in comparison to Ultraman Fighting Evolution, things feel much tighter here. You've got a pretty solid move pool for your characters too. Nothing that'll rival the big names in fighting games, but more than enough to give you some options to mess around with. You know, provided you find this out much quicker than I did. Yeah, it took me a bit to realize you had more involved moves at your disposal, so I ended up going through the story mode with just basic punches and kicks, which is decidedly less fun. Also tougher. If you're more experienced with fighting games, then I doubt this one will pose much of a challenge, but it definitely tripped me up a bit. Especially once I hit Gani Komoru. Dude wrecked me, and I admittedly had to bump the difficulty down. Regardless of if you have to do the same, you'll probably end up facing Shocker's Great Leader within an hour. But that isn't it for the game, as it also features a Shocker story you can play through, where you pick one of the various Shocker monsters to play as, and battle through the ranks to become the ultimate Shocker monster. Past that, you're off to fight Kamen Riders Ichigo and Nigo, which I could never manage. Nigo destroyed me every time. You'll even get to choose an aspect of your chosen monster to upgrade before you fight the Kamen Riders, giving you a nifty new look. It's a pretty neat extra mode, certainly worth more than a few playthroughs, if only to see the various upgraded monster designs. The presentation is pretty basic, but I like some of the flair they throw in, like getting a next episode preview after every stage. It really sells you on the idea that you're playing through an episode of the show. So yeah, Kamen Rider on PS1 is pretty damn solid. No wonder then that a couple of years later, Kamen Rider V3 hit the system, working off the same basic framework. You still battle a few grunts before fighting a monster, Destron this time, only now when you start out untransformed, you have to manually transform yourself. It's a small thing, but it's actually really cool, especially since you can strategize a bit with it. See, when you transform, you also regain all of your health, so you can wait to transform until your health is low. You do have to transform to finish off the monsters though, so you won't be going through the whole game as regular old Kazami Shiro. Worth noting that this game switches up the health system a little bit, where instead of the Destron monsters having health bars, there's instead this countdown timer kind of thing, and you just need to whack them X number of times before you can do the finisher. The principle's ultimately still the same though, I suppose. Just like the last game, the story mode is over pretty quick, but once you've wrapped up V3's story, you'll unlock Riderman's story to go through, and after finishing that, you'll unlock Ichigo and Nigo's stories. Those last two are a bit underwhelming since they're all of 2 stages and are damn near identical between them, but it's still pretty neat. Plus, Ichigo and Nigo really weren't in V3 as a show that much, so there wasn't much they could do, I suppose. No villain side story this time, but you still get plenty of bang for your buck. We didn't get any more Kamen Rider games based on the Showa writers after V3, probably because by the time that game came out, Kamen Rider had finally returned to television with Kamen Rider Kuga, so instead we got a game based on that series. Once again, working off the same basic framework, this game drops the Mook fighting segments in favor of being a full-on one-on-one fighter, and a pretty solid one at that. Unlike the previous games, Kuga offers something of a training mode in the form of Challenge Mode, a short stage-based affair that takes you through a handful of battles and gives you different objectives that'll help you learn how this game operates. They're all pretty simple goals: avoiding attacks for 30 seconds, taking an enemy down to half health, or beating them with a specific move, but it gets the job done. The ones where you avoid damage are far and away the weakest, especially once you realize you can just jump away from your foe for the whole time and be perfectly fine. But the others are pretty fun, giving you a grasp on some of Kuga's different forms and the attacks at your disposal. You'll blow through that mode pretty fast, and then you've got your standard arcade mode, letting you play around with the game's full roster, once you've unlocked them, that is. It's a pretty decent roster too, including all of Kuga's forms from the show, and plenty of Grongi. No Endagaba Zeba though, so if you're playing with friends, you cannot recreate the sick-ass final fight of the show, but the game did come out before that, so it's understandable. Still, kind of a bummer though. You unlock characters either by playing the arcade and survival modes, or by collecting cards in this extra mode here. You get cards by spending the points you'll earn from playing the other modes, so the game gives you a lot of incentive to check out the other stuff. You'll eventually need to collect all of these to unlock Kuga's ultimate form, which could take a bit since I'm pretty sure you can get duplicates. Also, it's probably not that worth it. As far as I can gather, Kuga's ultimate form in this game is just a reskin of his base form, which is lame as hell. I haven't actually gotten around to unlocking everything here, but I can definitely see myself coming back to it to get all the characters and whatnot. It's definitely on the simpler side of fighting games, but it's a damn good time regardless, especially for Rider fans. The following year, Kamen Rider Agito got its own game, and you can probably guess what I'm about to say. Yeah, it works off the same basic ideas as the previous one, but this time it's simplified down even more. Now you've just got basic attacks and a few special moves that are all used by pressing the circle button, either on its own or in conjunction with a direction. Challenge mode gets the axe this time around, but given the much simpler nature of the game, it's not that big a deal. You can pretty easily figure out the abilities of any given character within your first match or two. We do get a return of the multiple stories aspect from the first 2 games though. You'll start out with just Agito mode, but after you've beaten that, you'll unlock Gills mode, and completing that unlocks G3 mode, so you get a story for every major rider in the show. And they're all of pretty similar length, though obviously Agito himself gets the longest story at 8 stages. All 3 stories are pretty fun to go through thanks to all of the main riders playing pretty damn well, though I gravitated more towards my man, Kamen Rider Gills. They even gave him a dedicated screaming button to truly express the suffering that is being Gills. You love to see it. Same deal as before, you'll unlock other characters for the arcade mode through collecting cards, and in this game you'll use a resource called Game Bullets to do so, which you'll get after completing just about anything. It plays out like a gallery shooter, and this comes with the very cool bonus of being able to hit multiple cards with one shot if they overlap. If you're smarter than me and can consistently remember which button fires the gun, that is. It's the circle button, by the way. However, you can also use those bullets in the G3 room, where you can upgrade Kamen Rider G3, which is pretty cool. Admittedly, I'm not 100% sure what effects this has on G3 in-game, if any, but it's a neat mechanic, and upgrading in this mode is how you'll eventually unlock Kamen Rider G3X, so it's definitely worth investing time into. I ended up enjoying my time with Agito a lot more than the Kuga game, and given that Kuga was already a pretty solid, if basic fighter, that's a good indicator of Agito's quality, much like the shows themselves. It feels damn good to play, especially when you nail a solid combo, and it really manages to translate the feel of the show to the gameplay, if that makes sense. It's never going to show up at EVO or anything, but I'd say it's definitely worth checking out. Okay, let's put the Kamen Rider section to rest with Kamen Rider Ryuki, the final Rider game on PS1. There's less overall to go over here since we're on the 5th game working off this same general skeleton, but Ryuki does have a few trick events up its sleeve. First of all, individual rider stories have been scrapped once again. Granted, this game features all 13 Ryuki riders as playable characters, so having a story for each one probably would have resulted in only a couple being anything substantial, so maybe it's for the best that they didn't attempt that. Challenge mode is back from Kuga though, this time with a slightly more interesting presentation featuring the instigator of the rider fight himself, Kanzaki Shiro, showing you the ropes of the game. It's still a pretty basic mode, but very helpful for getting to grips with the game's mechanics, most notably the ability to use your selected rider's advent deck to gain weapons, or use your stronger advents or final event finishers. This is a really cool mechanic, but I gotta be honest, Ryuki does not feel very good to play compared to the other PS1 Rider games. The whole thing feels very slow and clunky, and battles devolve into the same pattern pretty darn fast. Each one essentially boils down to the same formula. You whack your opponent a few times to start lowering their health, then use an advent to deal some heavy damage, and these never miss by the way. Then, once you've got the option, you use your final vent, which also doesn't miss. A final vent isn't strictly guaranteed to kill, but if you've got your opponent down to maybe a quarter of their health bar, it'll probably get the job done. All the other usual trappings from the PS1 era Rider games are here: versus mode, arcade, the card collecting thing, but I didn't feel much desire to dig into them here like I did with the previous games. It's far from a terrible game. You could definitely play worse fighters on the PlayStation, and hell, even among the games in this video, but it's the Rider game I would recommend the least. It nails the flavor and presentation of the show, but it just doesn't feel that good to play and gets dull really fast. Not even being able to play as my favorite awful Snake Man Oja makes up for that. At least you get to hear Boundless Life during the fights.
俺たちのソーセージの誕生だ。雪印タイムレンジャーソーセージ。
タイムレンジャーのすべてがミニモデルになって君の手に。たくましくあれ。
雪印タイムレンジャーソーセージ。
Okay, last batch of games up next, and we're detouring into Kamen Rider's sister program, Super Sentai. Sentai unfortunately got kinda shafted on PS1, only receiving 2 games, and they both came out near the end of its lifespan. The first, released in 2001, was Hyakuju Sentai Gao Ranger. Instead of the fighting game route the Kamen Rider games went down, we've got a beat-em-up on our hands here. In every stage, you'll go through a couple screens of fighting Orgets before you take on one of the Orgs as your stage boss. Along the way, you'll team up with the rest of the Gao Rangers, though the only one you can actually control is Gao Red, which is kind of a bummer. Also, despite the fact that you fight Roki, and he seems to become purified to become Gao Silver like in the show, as far as I can tell, Gao Silver never actually shows up. You never fight alongside him, obviously you can't play as him. He just gets that one graphic after the Roki fight, and that's it, which is a major bummer because Gao Silver is awesome. Aside from your regular stages, you've also got mech fights to break things up, but these are definitely the weakest part of the game. You don't really have combos or special moves or anything, so you're just pressing the punch buttons over and over again, whether it be to deflect enemy attacks in the third-person sections, or to punch the Org in the first-person sections. Plus, the Orgs really love dashing back and forth, especially in the later stages. And since your attack isn't super fast, it becomes a pretty common sight to just barely miss your hits. Also, you've only got a short window in these first-person bits to properly deal damage before you get forced back into the third-person sections. They really nail the spectacle at least, and they're not total ass, just a little underwhelming. Still managed to put the Zord stages and Rita's Rewind to shame though. Once you've wrapped up the story mode, which features a villain made for the game by the way, that's pretty cool, there's nothing else to do besides run through the game again, so if it doesn't do much for you on that first go-through, you're probably not going to go back to this one. It is worth at least one playthrough though, in my opinion. The second and final PS1 Super Sentai game, as well as the last game in this video, is Ninpu Sentai Hurricaneger, released the year after Gao Ranger in 2002. Sort of like with the Kamen Rider games, the basic framework here is pretty much the same as Gao Ranger's game, just with some added bells and whistles that, in my opinion, make this game much more worth your time. No real need to cover the base gameplay here in much detail since it's pretty much the same as the last one. Beat 'em up style, wail on some mooks for a few screens before you fight the level's main monster, then mech fight. But Hurricaneger improves right off the bat since you actually get to play as every member of the team. At the start of each stage, you can choose to play as Hurricane Red, Blue, or Yellow, and pick which of the remaining 2 you want as your partner for the stage. Alternatively, there's this change option at the bottom, which will have you switching up characters and partners on every new screen if you want to keep some variety going. I tended to stick with Hurricane Blue almost entirely, since you can do that megaphone attack thing she does that makes monsters spin around, which I think is hilarious, especially since you can keep it going for a while. As the game progresses, you'll also get a chance to play as the Go Riders and Shurikenger, but they're not permanent additions to the roster, unfortunately. At least not as far as I can tell. The always good and reliable and definitely never stupid Ranger Wiki mentions a non-specific code that, in addition to unlocking Gao King, allows you to play as the Go Riders and Shurikenger in any stage, but it doesn't say what that code supposedly is or list any kind of source. I tried looking around in both English and Japanese to the best of my abilities and found exactly jack and shit, so either the wiki is wrong, very possible, or it's just super obscure. Back on track, the mech fights are a lot more involved here. The basics are the same as Gao Ranger, but now you have this super meter to fill up when you bat away enemy attacks, which lets you do a couple different specials. The max level of this is Senpujin Hurrier's Wheel Crash. I do kinda wish you actually got to play as Hurrier, but oh well. You'll also get to control the Go Rider's mech Go Raijin and Shurikenger's Tenkujin, though only for a couple of stages. For most of the fights, you're controlling Senpujin, and later Go-Rai Senpujin. These stages are quite a bit more fun than they were in Gao Ranger, given that additional resource with the super meter, and the fact that the enemies don't dash around quite as frantically as before. Though there is one annoyance. They've added these sections before the first-person parts where you and the monster are trading blows, and I've never totally understood what they wanted for these. If you succeed, then you'll go into the first-person segment and get to actually do damage to the org, but if you fail, you'll get knocked back and have to redo the third-person bit again. Most of the time I got by just mashing buttons, but come the last stages I was getting knocked back and needing to repeat bits. I think maybe you need to pick the right moves, like a rock, paper, scissors thing, but I'm genuinely not sure. Even having beaten the game and looked at videos that do this correctly, I'm not 100% certain what's actually expected of you. Story mode in this game also features a third kind of stage, these gallery shooter levels where you're throwing shurikens at Magirapas. They're piss easy, but still enjoyable and a nice change of pace. And after you've beaten the game, you'll even unlock an endless version of this where you're trying to rack up a high score. You actually get a good amount of stuff to do after beating the game, especially in comparison to the nothing to do after you finished Gao Ranger. In addition to the gallery shooter, you'll unlock a new stage where the Hurricaners team up with Gao Red. It's pretty short, but it's a nice bonus, and having Sentai team-ups is always cool, even if it's only Gao Red for this stage. I won't go over absolutely everything, but suffice it to say there's plenty of bang for your buck with Hurricaner, and it is absolutely worth the play. Genuinely a really good time that I can definitely see myself going back to. Alright, we're getting pretty lengthy by my standards, so let's call it there. There are several other Toku-related games on the PlayStation that I didn't cover, like Gamera 2000, which I suck at, or Super Tokusatsu Wars, which I don't know enough Japanese to go through, but I think we have a solid lineup here. Most of these games are at least worth some of your time, the only ones I'd say to steer clear of altogether being those two Ultraman fighting games. The highlights are pretty easily Kamen Rider Agito and Ninpu Sentai Hurricaner. If you only play one game from this video, make it one of those. Down the road I'll probably end up covering Toku games on other consoles, or some of the stragglers on PS1, since there's some really interesting titles out there, like that Garo game on PS2. For now though, that'll be it from me. I hope you have a good day, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is for you, and I will see you guys next time.